Total Screen proudly presents their official podcast, OnScreen, with your hosts, Tyson Gifford and William Roerig. Hello, everybody, and welcome to OnScreen, the official podcast of the Total Screen. My name is Tyson.
My name is Will.
And today we are going to be talking about a little thing that just released this week. Tears of the Kingdom. Not the game, just a brief gameplay demo that was showing. So we're going to talk about that.
The first gameplay ever shown from this game.
And then before that, we're going to talk about some stuff that's coming up on the horizon, and that's going to be it for this week's podcast. So let's start things off with our On the Horizon segment. On the Horizon. On the Horizon is where we talk about stuff that's coming up in the week ahead or so. I actually had a pretty big list, but I narrowed it down because it was just too much. There's a lot of stuff coming out. So I narrowed it down to kind of more interesting things here. We're going to start off on Wednesday, April 5th. Air comes to theaters. This is the story about how the Air Jordans, the Nike Air Jordans came about. It's the next movie directed by Ben Affleck. Stars Matt Damon and Jason Bateman and Ben Affleck himself.
This is probably exciting for shoe nerds, but I do not care.
Hey, it's an interesting story. So, it's kind of like, I don't care about racing, but I watched that, Ford versus Ferrari movie, because it was pretty, an interesting story.
Yeah.
So, I'll probably watch this. I have a movie subscription, so it's like, if I don't watch things that look even mildly interesting, it's like I'm leaving money on the table. There's something else coming out in theaters on Wednesday, April 5th. Maybe some people would find it appealing, not sure.
I know, I'm excited.
It's called the Super Mario Brothers movie. That is also coming on Wednesday, April 5th. We've talked about this before. We've covered trailers and stuff. Yeah, I'm super excited for it, and that's coming up. It's coming up soon. Crazy. We got the theme park. We got the new movie. You think we'll get a game by the end of the year?
No. We might get a Donkey Kong game, but I think the next Mario game is going to be on the next Switch. I don't think they have a Mario, mainline Mario game ready for this year.
The Super Mario Run 2 on mobile.
Yes. Easy win. Interesting, bring up Mario Run. They actually updated it so you could play a level for free every day if you haven't purchased the app.
I already purchased it and didn't play it. So.
I already purchased it. I played, I got a couple worlds. It's pretty fun. It's actually a pretty fun auto runner. It controls really well. It's one of those things it's easy if you just want to get to the end of the level, but finding the coins can actually be challenging. So it's pretty decent.
It's the Kirby of Mario's.
It was worth $10 to me. I know some people feel differently about that, but I think the $10 I spent on it was wholly justified.
I played a little bit, and then I remembered, the only kind of games I like playing on mobile are, little simple puzzle games and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
I just don't like the experience of playing mobile. Same way I don't like the experience of playing handheld, It's the same thing for me, so.
Yeah, that's fair.
Then we have coming on Thursday, April 6th, Beef is coming to Netflix. It stars Steven Yeun and Ali Wong, and it's kind of a story about road rage between two people going back and forth.
Oh, yeah. Interesting.
Then on Friday, April 7th, Jury Duty is coming to Freevee.
I can't believe they're making a remake of the Pauly Shore Jury Duty movie. That's awesome.
No, but this is coming to Freevee. Freevee is Amazon Prime's free streaming service. It used to be IMDb TV, and now it's called Freevee.
Yeah.
This is a mini-series. It's kind of it's one of those, it is one of those reality shows where one person isn't in on the joke. Kind of they did that, what was that one they did before where they did a Big Brother style show, and the one guy, he was had no idea that he was on a fictional show. He thought he was on a reality show, but every other contestant, was an actor.
I gotta be honest, I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, That's what this is, basically. So there's a fictional trial and a jury, all these people are there for jury duty, but they're all actors. This is all like a scripted series except one. Except one person on the jury is not and thinks they're on an actual trial. And so it's like they're just like pranking him basically. And it's like but for a season, And James Marsden is in the series as himself on the jury.
He's on the jury?
Yeah.
If I got called to jury duty and I saw like somebody famous like James Marsden as a fellow juror, I would immediately think something was up.
It happens.
Like, oh, yeah,
famous people do serve on juries. I mean, it's one of the unifying things that unites us all.
Unites us all. Celebrities are real people too.
Yeah.
They're just like us.
Except they have all the resources we don't.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That is coming on Friday, April 7th to Freevee, which is again Amazon Prime's kind of like free streaming service. It used to be IMDb TV. To access Freevee, you just go to Amazon Prime and watch it. What that means is that even if you have Amazon Prime, you have to watch ads when you're watching something on Freevee, which sucks, but oh well. Next up, we have The Portable Door. This, I watched a trailer for it and I was actually kind of surprised. I really like kind of whimsical, kind of fantasy type stuff. And this kind of has that written all over it. It's an Australian movie. It stars Sam Neill and Christoph Waltz. And it's about a guy, he ends up working for some bureau, some organization he gets a job for. And they're like in charge of all these kind of like weird mystical objects and stuff, including something that he becomes, the kind of keeper of, which is a magical door that can open up at any time you want and can take you anywhere you want. So it's kind of like having the door key from Lock and Key. But yeah, or the Anywhere key, I think it's called. Yeah. It's kind of like having that or something, except the door just pops up out of nowhere instead of having to use another existing door. But yeah, it's this kind of whimsical, looks kind of Harry Potter-esque kind of thing, but about this guy with this magical door. That is coming on Friday, April 7th to MGM Plus. And lastly, on Friday, April 7th in movie theaters, there's a movie coming out called Paint. This is a comedy movie starring Owen Wilson as like a Bob Ross type. And he's even got like the full afro and everything, like the Bob Ross afro.
Yeah.
And he's like a painter on like a public access channel or something. And it's a comedy about that. That is coming Friday, April 7th. They recognized the Bob Ross love out in on the internet and said we should make a movie like this.
I don't know, like, I have no idea. I watched the trailer and I'm like, it doesn't portray his character in a particularly good light.
Well, he isn't Bob Ross. He's like a Bob Ross type.
Yeah. I'm kind of like, why are we shitting on Bob Ross? Come on. Why are we doing this?
Well, he'll end up having a heart of gold. It's Owen Wilson, so.
Yeah, it's Owen Wilson. Owen Wilson's great.
Yeah, so you can't scream out at Owen Wilson, right? So
he was the best addition to the MCU recently, so.
All right, and then that is the end of our On the Horizon segment, and that leaves only On Beat, which is our news segment. This week on Beat, we are going to be talking about The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom gameplay demo. We're going to be talking about the new abilities that were revealed, aspects of the environment, other things we might have noticed, and what's going on with that. This is the first time we've seen gameplay from this. It starts off, when they start off, it looks like Breath of the Wild.
That's what everybody says, and it grates me too, because I see like a lot of comments, or I've seen a lot of comments that reveal like people saying, oh, this looks like DLC. And I'm like, no, this is a new game. Yes, it looks like Breath of the Wild because it's the sequel to Breath of the Wild. Like, I don't know what the hell people were expecting.
The base world is the same but different, and everything else is like drastically changed.
It's like comparing Ocarina of Time to Majora's Mask. People say, oh, Majora's Mask is, like, if you just saw like 10 minutes of gameplay of Majora's Mask, where he's just like in like one of the freaking dungeons or whatever, and they didn't show you like the time travel mechanics or anything. They just showed you like normal looking Zelda gameplay. You would probably say, this looks just like Ocarina of Time. What's the point? Like, the one area I'll push back on that is that in Majora's Mask it was a different world. Like the map was completely different and stuff. The map is going to be like different in this. They said Hyrule's changed.
It's changed, yeah, but there's still like people have done comparison shots and the changes are pretty, they're not super significant from what we've seen so far.
We haven't seen a lot so far. They're hiding a lot.
We haven't seen a lot.
Very conservative with what they've shown.
Yes, that is true. And there are new features. So even if you're not on the overworld, there's all these sky islands from the past trailers, not from this. It seems like there's going to be some underground areas as well.
So the fact that what you've seen in the gameplay looks very similar to a world from the first could be entirely intentional. They chose that slice because it revealed the least.
Yeah, I believe so. Especially for a game that was this long in development. Though, some of the abilities kind of point to why this game might have been so long in development, because they're pretty insane.
Yes, they are.
So I'm going to go through these, not necessarily in the order that they were shown, because there's two that are kind of the real big ones that I want to save for the end. First, before we get to the abilities, though, we get introduced to a new enemy type. These are called constructs. They're kind of like machine-type enemies.
They're apparently guardians of the Sky Islands, because if you notice, they only appeared on the Sky Islands in the gameplay.
Mm-hmm. That we've seen, yeah. I mean, there wasn't much showing outside of Sky Island, but...
Right, I'm just making inferences by what was shown, yeah.
There's also some evidence that they're not all hostile. There's one that was shown that had kind of a marker above its head that's similar to, when you talk to an NPC. There's also somebody pointed out that, on the map, there's, a store location icon when they were on a Sky Island, so that's probably a store operated by some constructs, because we haven't seen any other signs of life on them. So, besides, a few. Well, I guess we see, some stuff to hunt there. But it seems like they're going to be more than just a new enemy type. It's just kind of that's like a race or something. And we're going to see them as both NPCs and as enemies. But what's really interesting is that there was a shot where a construct was defeated and one of the items left behind was called a Zonai charge. And this is a reference to the Zonai, who were kind of an ancient civilization in the first Breath of the Wild game that we never met, but some of the armor sets and other things are attributed to them in the little pieces of lore that are in Breath of the Wild. Yeah. So it looks like the Zonai are going to be playing a big part in this game.
Yeah, so, it does seem that way, yeah.
So that's kind of interesting. Now let's move on to the abilities. So, recall is something that we'd seen a few times in the trailers before. We saw a shot, it was very similar to what they did, except we got to see it in more detail of rising up on a rock to a Sky Island area, or one of the Sky Islands. We also saw a bit in a trailer before that seems to be the same ability, where Link stopped a spiked ball that was rolling down a hill and launched it back up the hill by rewinding time. So we kind of have insight into what that is now, which is just an ability that rewinds time for an object. And this is one of the ways that you're going to be able to reach the Sky Islands in this game. And so I think this is cool. I think reaching the island by this is okay, it's not that big of a deal. I think what's more interesting is that we have insight on what this ability is now, and that gives context to what we'd seen in other trailers. I think the way it was used with the spiked ball in a previous trailer was far more interesting, and gives me, now that I know what the ability is, it gives me ideas on what you could possibly use it for.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's going to be something to think about, what that is going to be able to do. Another ability we learned about is Ascend. Again, this is something we also saw before. We saw Link kind of push through the floor on the ground, he came up from beneath it and came through it, and we didn't really know what that meant. And now we kind of get what that actual ability is, which is it's an ability to kind of rise through a ceiling and come out on the top surface area. And what's really interesting here is what he shows is being able to do this from inside a cave to reach the top of a tall structure, or a hill or a cliff or something. Being able to come up on top of that instead of climbing all the way up it, you're going to be able to get up that way, which is going to be more interesting, I think, when we start getting into things like rain, where rain always obstructed climbing. Now you're going to have possibly another way to get around that.
Right, yeah, this is going to make climbing easier for the areas in which you're able to do it. Because it does depend on there, being a cave in that mountain, right? There's some sort of indoor environment you could get into.
Mm-hmm.
Because you have to have a ceiling above you. So it doesn't completely, invalidate, all climbing in the game. Because I'm sure there's going to be mountains and stuff that just don't have an entrance or any way for you to use recall. But overall it will make traversal easier. It's probably the one I was least interested in, just because, I mean, it's like, yeah, that's cool.
It's very specific. We didn't really get to see, I'm sure there's probably other creative uses for it that we just haven't learned yet. There is the cool shot of Link like swimming puzzles. Up though.
There's gonna be puzzles involving it and stuff, there will be.
Yeah, so, there's gonna be, I'm sure there's gonna be some more uses for it that we just haven't thought of yet that, makes sense when you end up seeing them and thinking about it. But, we do get the cool animation of Link like kind of swimming through the rock, which was kind of cool, to get up to the other side. So that looked kind of cool at least. Now we're getting to the kind of more interesting abilities. And the first of the more interesting abilities that was shown was Fuse. And this allows you to combine your kind of items that you're holding with other things.
The star of the show.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting because I was watching this, I was like, oh, this was definitely inspired by the stuff people were doing in Breath of the Wild, such as taking rafts and placing octo balloons on them.
Well, that's more the other ability, which is Ultra Hand. Those are two separate abilities.
Oh, that's right. Never mind. I'm done.
Yeah.
I'm getting them. Well, they're so very similar. Like, they're practically the same ability. It's like, yeah. Okay, yeah. Fuse is like, Fuse is, oh god.
Fuse is specifically things that you're like holding. So like your shield, your sword, a stick.
You could take any two items and combine them. Theoretically. Mm-hmm. Theoretically, any two items. They did not specify if there are limitations to this, but they showed off some really cool stuff, some really cool item combinations that you could do. One of the coolest to me was like putting one of those like mushrooms on the shield and like making it so that when the enemy hits you, it creates a big cloud of smoke and then you can stealth kill the enemy because the enemy loses track of you. Like, that's a really cool combination. I saw a funny
meme where it was they put one of the chickens, what are they called? I forgot what the Zelda chickens are called.
The cuckoos, yeah.
Yeah, put a cuckoo on a shield to make the person invincible. So whenever they attack, you just hold out, and then they'll eventually get mobbed by the chickens or something. That would be cool if that actually happened, but I don't think they showed anything about living beings outside of like, mushrooms aren't really beings. They're just I don't think living, you could, but they're not beings.
Yeah, because where's the end? Like you could use monsters to your sword. I don't think that's gonna be a thing.
Yeah. I don't think that's gonna be a thing, but that would be awesome. It was a funny meme. But it's cool that you're gonna be able to kind of craft weapons or just other things. I mean, one of the cool ones they showed was an enemy had one. So enemies are gonna be able to use these constructs are gonna be able to use fused items as well. We don't know if they're able to make them like you are or if they can just use them. But they had one that was like, it was just a board on a stick, and so they were able to like swing it to cause like a gust of wind that would like knock you back. And so that's like really cool. I like the idea of the mushroom on the shield. That gives you an idea of like, well, what else can you pin to a shield or something that would have an effect on an impact? I mean, are you going to be able to attach like a bomb to your shield? And is that going to be like a new way of doing like bomb jumping, which was really popular in Breath of the Wild? Or
I mean, the possibilities are endless at this point. Like, it really gets the imagination. And when you like watch the demo and you see like the stuff he's showing you, but then like you see in the inventory all these items, and you immediately start thinking that he didn't combine into anything or even mention.
Like meat arrows.
Yeah, and you start thinking, oh my god, what if you use that and combine that? What happens then?
Yeah, your arrows was the coolest thing, because they showed that now instead of getting like ice arrows and stuff, you're just going to use like an ice elemental attached to your arrow, and that's an ice arrow now. And then they also showed, they didn't really show what effect it would have because he overrode it right away, but like making like a leaf arrow, I'm guessing maybe that does some kind of a push of wind or something.
Yeah, but I think that's like a wind.
And then they showed one where he used a Kisai to make like homing arrows, and that like really gets the imagination going about what some of these things might do. Because there's like, if you saw like when he brought up the menu, those are the things that you can attach to it that he had in his inventory. And if you go through it, there's like meat, there is a wing, like a key swing, not just the eye. So what's the wing gonna do? Is that gonna make the arrow just fly straight? Like, like what's that gonna do? How's is that going to affect things? And then it just kind of makes you like start to think about like all the different monster parts and stuff that were in Breath of the Wild, and then you start going like, oh well, what about this, or what about this? Like what are horns and teeth going to do when you add those to an arrow? Like what's the effect of that going to be? And yeah, it's kind of interesting to think about what you're going to be able to do with it. That was like the most interesting part of Fuse, I think, was like how you connect them to arrows, because it's like also, you always have different arrow types in Zeldas, but now you're going to have like hundreds of arrow types.
Like, yeah. But I wonder if you're just not going to traditionally find ice arrows in the game. You're going to be expected to use Fuse now if you want that. Same in Breath of the Wild, like, you would find, like, there were elemental swords that you could find in chests sometimes, like a fire sword or an ice sword. I wonder if that's no longer a thing, if you're just going to use Fuse to add that effect to your weapon.
Yeah, I mean, that seems like what it's saying, you know?
Yeah.
Perhaps you'll find pre-fused weapons or pre-fused items, you know?
Another interesting thing, speaking of pre-fused, they demonstrate that enemies can have fused weapons.
Yeah. But yeah, like he had a giant fan thing that he used to knock Link off a platform. Off the Sky Island.
Seamless transition from the Sky Island to the ground.
That was one of the coolest things. That transition from the Sky Island to the ground, because you're like, you can see the entire map basically. You're so high up when you're on the Sky Island. This is like when I played Skyward Sword when it was on the Wii. This was like the dream. You know, when you when you dive off your Loftwing in Skyward Sword, you can only really do it in specific areas. Like, it's like, oh, you're flying above one of the zones, so now you can dive off. And you kind of get the idea of like, oh, it's like this shortcut to him going from being into the sky to being on the ground or something. And you get like a little animation, and that drives your fantasy of like, oh, imagine if you could just dive from anywhere in the sky and go anywhere on the map. Now it looks like you can.
Yeah, now you can.
So that's like super cool.
Loading screen or anything. It's just like everything's happening in real time. It's like, okay, what witchcraft are they using to do this on the Switch?
Exactly, yeah. It's pretty crazy, and that was really cool. But let's talk about the last item, or last ability they showed.
Yeah, arguably, like, I think it's equally as exciting as Fuse. I think they're both on the same level.
I think this ability in particular is going to be the one that makes this like a Twitch hit.
Yeah,
you know?
I think so.
Which is Ultra Hand. And this it's kind of like Magnesis, except it's not limited to metal. And then it has an additional effect of like gluing things together with this kind of like slimy glue that looks really cool, by the way. The way it animates that, like the threaded tissues that connect the things looks really cool.
Yeah, it does.
But we saw in this that they were able to put together a raft, and they were able to add like fans to it and then use that to like blow across the other side of the river. To me, this is like the kind of thing where I'm kind of iffy about. Like, I think it's by far the most powerful of the abilities that they showed as far as like the options it brings up. It's also the one that kind of like just look wise and stuff kind of makes it feel almost kind of goofy. We've seen this before with like the cars. There was I think the last trailer they showed, you saw like a car-like vehicle on the overmap, and you also saw like a floating platform. It's interesting what you're going to be able to do with it.
This was inspired by stuff people were doing in the original Breath of the Wild.
Yeah, it's just kind of goofy.
People were doing, I posted something on the Discord to you, like this crazy thing that somebody managed to get happening in the original Breath of the Wild. And
where you do the two pieces, the two mine things, the cart things together,
Yeah, like he's in the sky, using Magnesis to make this thing fly, while the Guardian's like on another platform, and it's also flying. Yeah, when I saw this, like, it was very clear to me that Nintendo saw people doing this with the original game and just thought, oh shit, we should make that an actual mechanic. We should expand upon that.
They saw fans doing stuff and they said, hold my beer.
Yeah, hold my beer. Yeah, exactly. Which I think is really cool. I think it's really cool. The concept of, like, Nintendo taking inspiration from the fans is, like, really cool. I just love it. Again, this is like Fuse in which, like, your imagination can run wild.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
It's, like I said, for me, it's kind of iffy because on one hand, it's going to open up a lot of possibilities. On another hand, it's almost making it feel like this game is more of a puzzle platformer now than it is like an adventure game, which is, you know, I mean, it's still cool. And I love the chemistry system in the first Breath of the Wild. And the possibilities that it opens up are huge and stuff, but I don't go into playing a Zelda game going like, cool, Minecraft. You know what I mean? Like,
it's not Minecraft. It's,
you know what I mean,
so
though? It's like, I don't go into it thinking like, oh, this game's entirely about crafting, you know?
No, yeah.
That's not what I think of when I think Zelda. So it's like, I'm iffy on this.
It's not, but like, it's, to me, this is a natural evolution of the sandbox style world that they built with the first game. It just expands on like using the game's physics engine to do incredible things. The best part of Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom is the physics engine that they came up with, because all the crazy shit that you saw people doing with the original Breath of the Wild was because of the physics engine allowed that stuff to happen.
Yeah, my issue isn't that they're doing stuff with the physics engine, because of course Breath of the Wild had a physics engine that worked really well. I'm not arguing that it's not like the evolution of what happened in Breath of the Wild with that. The only thing that gives me pause is that it feels almost like they're pushing too far in this direction, where it's like overtaking what the game's going to be about. Like in Breath of the Wild, you say that was like the coolest thing, and it was the coolest thing, but it wasn't like the most prominent aspect of the game. The most prominent aspect of the game was just getting through that huge world, surviving, being able to climb and travel anywhere, and kind of like in this naturalistic sense. And it almost feels kind of goofy now in a way where, like, to me, it takes away the immersion. When you have these like giant, like nuts and bolts looking cars and stuff that you're going to be, it just kind of like, it takes away from the immersion of what we had before of like, you're in this world and you're like getting through it. And now it's like you have these like weird crafts and stuff, and you're attaching like fucking fans to things, you know? It's like, I don't know. It's like something about it is just weird to me. I'm not saying in any way that this is going to hold me back from playing the game or from using these systems. I've already pre-ordered this game. I'm going to, like, I did that a long time ago. Nothing in my mind has changed about that. I'm really still interested in playing this game. I'm actually also still excited about using the Ultra Hand and finding out things that I can do with it. But there's a part of me that also feels like some of the immersion is being broken now. Like it's feeling more like a game now than it did before. I don't know.
Okay.
Like that's the way I see it. Like it's just feeling less like I'm in the world and more like I'm exploiting like systems, you know? Which is cool, and it was something you could do in Breath of the Wild, but it just seems like really transparent now.
I respect your take. I disagree, but I respect it.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a matter of degrees to me, because it's like, I still am going to use the thing. It's just a matter of like, I'm worried about the effect that's going to have on the experience for me. But it's still a really cool thing to see, and it's still something that's like insanely complex, and probably means that the QA team for Tears of the Kingdom is probably the size of like 3 small cities.
Oh yeah, I heard something to the effect of the game was like finished in 2019, and then the rest of this time was just polishing in QA. You know. Yeah,
I mean, to make sure that this like game is functional when you have this level of freedom added to it is a huge thing.
Yes, it is. And Nintendo, like, not with Zelda. They don't want to release a broken game.
Yeah. So one of the things that I know people hated about Breath of the Wild, I actually liked it. I thought it added to it, but a lot of people hated it. That was confirmed to return is items breaking.
Yes. I love the way they did that, though. They showed that because they ripped that Band-Aid off right away. And they did it as a prelude to revealing the fuse mechanic. So, yes, because the first thing he showed was like the tree branch, breaking the tree branch, and then he segued that into the fuse to like, oh, now I got a more durable weapon.
Yeah. See, like, I never mind the item durability thing in the first game because I think it encouraged experimentation.
Yeah.
In a way that I think if somebody got a cool sword, they would have just stuck to that cool sword.
Yeah.
They would have gone like, okay, and they never would have played around with other possibilities.
I would have ran through the entire game with the fire sword.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But like, with durability as a factor, it makes you like think about different ways of using items. It makes you think like, oh, maybe you ran out of an item and you don't have access to a really useful item, so you have to use one of your abilities instead. And there were moments that were really cool moments moments where like I'd be fighting like a bokoblin or something and I'd hit him with a weapon. My weapon would shatter. When my weapon shattered, it would knock their weapon out of their hand. And then it was like a mad dash to pick up their weapon before they did to use that against them. And that became like a huge like experience. It was like wow, that was like a really cool moment that would have never happened if my item had never shattered. So it's like, I never minded that. I think it adds a lot to the game. I think the only issue is that early in the game, a lot of stuff just, you can't even beat a single enemy without it breaking, you know, like that, it was a bit much, but that seems to be taken care of. If you're going to be using fusion, you're going to be getting kind of stuff that's more durable, like right off the bat, because you're just going to be able to do it like a stick in a rock or something. Like even the most primitive things, you're going to be able to make more durable from the get-go.
Yeah, like they point out, like if you have a stick, it's gonna break pretty quickly, but fuse a rock to it and it becomes more durable. Like even if you used up some of its durability, like you have a new weapon and you have more durability. Like it's way more experimentation now than what was in the first one.
Mm-hmm. And the ability to make like a really long spear, you know, or something like that to kind of keep enemies at range, you know.
I saw like a meme where like where Link has like 100 fused spears or something and using it as a pole vault to get to like the Sky Islands.
I like the one that somebody put where they had, what was it? It's all me going to take out Ganon in Tears of the Kingdom. And it was like a sword, but it was made out of like sticking a bunch of like markers together, the way they like tap to end, you know? I thought that was hilarious. It's like, just the idea that you're going to be able to make kind of absurd things. Again, it could break the immersion. I think it's less so here than it is with the Ultra Hand, but it's cool. It's a cool idea. I want to see some stuff that kind of looks cooler though too, you know, like that you can make more durable kind of creative weapons, but they kind of look goofy. I want to see some more kind of cool looking stuff that you can do with this, which I'm sure there's going to be as well. But yeah, that's kind of what's going on there. What do you think? Did you get any other hints from this gameplay thing about what's going to be in this game? Anything that excited you that's outside of outside of these systems that we've talked about?
No, nothing. Nintendo's being very secretive. I saw a great tweet by Chris Kohler. He says, like, I love that Nintendo is committing to showing absolutely nothing about Tears of the Kingdom. He said, absolute king shit. This is going to be an 11 out of 10, no question. Yeah, it's true. They're playing this very close to the vest, so I'm just thinking these things are like, this is cool, but they clearly got like a lot more surprises in store. They didn't show much of the world at all. Just a little bit of Hyrule Field and a couple of Sky Islands.
There was one thing I noticed that is possibly something, but, you know, I don't even know if it is something or not. And that is one of the Sky Islands looked completely like man-made, like a structure rather than like a natural environment with like tiers and levels. It was like a really tall structure. And I'm like, is this a dungeon? Is this like a dungeon that's a Sky Island? Are they going to have dungeons in the sky that you can reach?
And that's the thing. Like, is that a dungeon? Are there dungeons in this game?
I think that's one of the things that people, people missed from Breath of the Wild were like true dungeons. Because we had we had the shrines, which were like little kind of puzzle rooms and stuff. They were fun. And then we had the, Divine Beast, which they were okay. I mean, they were like puzzles, but there were like hardly any enemies there. There was, they were all kind of just based on tilting, it's like there wasn't too much creative going into them, And then we didn't get like just big, cool dungeons. Like, we didn't have like a forest temple or a water temple or like, some weird thing like how you had that ice palace in Twilight Princess or something. We didn't have anything remotely like that in Breath of the Wild. And that was one thing that a lot of Zelda fans were kind of missing. And so on the checklist of things that Zelda fans wanted in Tears of the Kingdom, that was probably number one. Was like, is there a way that you can make it feel still be Breath of the Wild-esque, but add in dungeons again? And I have a hope that they're back. And based on what I saw with that one island, it really makes me think like there's a strong possibility that we're going to have some semblance of dungeons. They're probably going to be a little different because I doubt they're going to do the whole thing where you get into the dungeon and you find an item and that item is the key to like working your way through that dungeon, because that's not the way gameplay worked in Breath of the Wild. And that's not the way it seems to be working here. So I don't think that's going to be the case. But I could see them doing something where it's kind kind of like one of the shrines, but more complex and bigger,
yeah.
you know?
Any dungeons that you have are clearly going to use your powers for the puzzles.
Yeah. So it's like, I kind of think like it's going to be more like the shrines, except like maybe more themed and more, like, you know, because the shrines all kind of look the same.
Maybe like specifically centered around one of your powers. Like there might be a dungeon where a lot of the puzzles need you to use the power that lets you like go through ceilings.
Mm-hmm. Like I could see them like having the dungeons blocking some of those abilities too. I mean, shrines did that where like you couldn't climb on the inside of shrines, you know?
Yeah.
So they could make it like, oh, a mysterious power is blocking your ability to do this or something, you know? And then that forces you to kind of work around that. I think you almost have to do that to make dungeons appreciable, you know? Instead of just like, oh, I can cheese my way through it, you know, really quickly. In order to kind of like make them have impact as a dungeon, you kind of have to like create limitations. And they did mention, Aonuma did mention when he showed the Ascend ability that there would be limitations.
Oh yeah, so, well, yeah, there are definitely limitations. There's limitations to all the abilities, I'm sure.
Yeah. Probably they QA'd and said, okay, this is now completely broken. We need to create a limitation here.
It's like, oh man, I could use Ultra Hand to build myself a mech and just like blow up Ganon. Damn.
Yeah, they're gonna like have to like figure out ways around that, and I'm sure they did. So yeah, that's cool. One other thing I was gonna bring up is that, what do you think about existing abilities? Because we have the existing abilities that we got in Breath of the Wild that were such a huge part of that game. We are showing new abilities. Some of these seem to make old abilities redundant. So it becomes an issue of, do you think that we're gonna be getting some of those old abilities back again? Like I said, what's the point of Magnesis when you have Ultra Hand? You know, like it destroys kind of the reasoning to have Magnesis. But Aonuma said that some of the abilities have been upgraded or changed or something. So I could see them still having some of the things. Like Stasis, for example, is somewhat similar to Recall, except it freezes time instead of rewinding it. So I have to imagine that there'd still be a reason to have something like Stasis in the game. And then, of course, bombs. Like, what's a Zelda game without bombs, you know?
Right, yeah, exactly.
But some of them, I have to imagine, are gonna be, like, you know, Magnesis is, I don't really see there being much point in Magnesis anymore, you know?
Yeah, I don't know, but it'll probably still have its use.
I don't know, I think it just won't be there. I think Ultra Hand kind of replaces Magnesis.
Again, there's a lot of stuff we don't know, like, what's going on with Link's hand? Why has it got all that green junk all over it? And also, like, again, one of the primary logos of, like, a destroyed Master Sword. Mm-hmm. What's going on with that?
I think lore-wise, a lot of that stuff's going to be tied into the Zonai.
Yeah.
The sword, it wasn't like a Master Sword. It looked kind of like a little different.
It's the Master Sword, for sure.
It looked like a Zonai version of the Master Sword. It had some differences.
Last thing we should probably mention with this is Switch OLED Zelda was confirmed. The leak was real.
The Joy-Cons look horrible.
Not that I was doubting it. The leak looked pretty convincing.
Well, it was just obvious too. It's like, of course they're gonna do a theme. I mean, they've done themed ones for Pokemon. I think they did a themed one for Fire Emblem even. It's like, if they're gonna do a themed one for Fire Emblem, they're definitely gonna do a themed one for...
No, there wasn't a Fire Emblem one.
I think there was one for Three Houses.
Oh, maybe. I'm not thinking that far back. I'm specifically talking Switch OLED, though.
Yeah.
They did one for Splatoon so far for this year.
And again, if they're going to do one for Splatoon, of course they're going to do one for Zelda.
Oh, yeah. I thought, like, that was pretty obvious that they would do a special, because Zelda is, like, one of Nintendo's, like, biggest franchises ever.
Yeah.
And I guess that dock looks great, though. I do like the Joy-Cons. I admit, I love the Joy-Cons. I love the dock. I really wish...
It looks like such a sticker.
I really wish Nintendo would, like, sell this stuff separately from a Switch, so I wouldn't have to buy another damn console. I mean, I'm not buying another Switch for this, but, like...
Yeah.
I would buy that dock and those Joy-Cons.
The dock is... I think the Joy-Cons look like
Let me give you money. Although I like the Skyward... As far as I like the Skyward Sword Joy-Cons better.
I think the Joy-Cons look like, they just straight up look like a decal that was placed on top of a golden Joy-Con or something. Right. That's what makes it look cheap to me. But like, the dock looks really cool, and the back of the Switch looks really cool. Like, the textured kind of look on the back of it looks really cool too. So I would probably, if I got that system, I'd get it and then like swap out the Joy-Cons for something else. But I gotta say, though, that it was obvious that this was going to happen. It wasn't just that there was a leak, but it's like, who thought there wouldn't be? You know? They also showed a Pro Controller and a case for the Switch that were also themed for Tears of the Kingdom. The Pro Controller, I think, also looks kind of like ass, kind of like the Joy-Con. Has one of the grips is white, and it just kind of looks off, like it doesn't like look natural or organic in any way. I don't know. I wasn't a fan of that. The case looks all right, but I don't really use a case because I don't really use my Switch portably that much. So yeah, I mean, if you still don't have a Switch, or if you're one of those people that just buys every version of a system, or if you have a launch Switch and you're thinking about upgrading to an OLED, this is a good option.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Well, that is it for our discussion of The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, the gameplay demo that just happened yesterday. And as we finish that up, so do we finish up this week's podcast. Next week, we are going to be catching up on some of the stuff we've been watching and playing. That includes Resident Evil 4. I'm guessing, you said Resident Evil 4, I'm guessing you mean the remake?
Yeah. I mean,
you didn't just finally get around to playing the old Resident Evil 4?
It's like, I just bought this console called the GameCube. It has this interesting looking game called Resident Evil 4. We're going to try it for the first time.
But yeah, Will's going to be talking about his experiences with Resident Evil 4 Remake, and I'll be talking about a game I've been playing. I already mentioned it once, but I have a few more thoughts to talk about, which is Octopath Traveler 2, and maybe even some movies and other stuff that we've kind of been playing or watching in our off time outside of our podcast discussion stuff. So that's what we're going to be talking about next week, so stay tuned for that. Thank you everybody for listening. You can reach me on Twitter. I'm at Tyson Gifford. You can reach Will. He is at Voxel Hero. You can check out our SoundCloud page, our website, everything like that. If you go to the website, thetotalscreen.com, and check one of the container stories for our podcast episode, you'll have all the relevant links inside to get all the information you need about us and our social accounts and our SoundCloud page and all that stuff. The RSS feed for our podcast, anything you need, that's where you'll be able to find it. You can subscribe to this podcast through your podcast client of choice like Apple Podcast or Pocket Cast, and the entire backlog of our podcast is available on our YouTube channel, so you can go back in time and hear us make predictions about like a Nintendo Direct from like 2018 or something, and go, wow, they got that wrong.
Yeah. Exactly.
But that is it, so thank you everybody for listening. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you for listening to the OnScreen podcast, the official podcast of The Total Screen. Visit our website at thetotalscreen.com. This podcast can be found on any major podcast client, including Pocket Cast and Apple Podcast. The entire backlog of this podcast and other content can be found on our YouTube channel.